Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Socially Conscious Content Creation panel. And thank you to the Monaco Streaming Film Festival for putting together such a powerful forum where we can discuss streaming and celebrate the work that we're all doing. We're here today with some incredible panelists that I'm super excited to hear their thoughts and insights on creating socially conscious content. We're going to explore what kind of content is being created, how audiences are responding, some of the trends that are happening, and the impact of streaming networks on this kind of content. So to start, if we could all just provide a brief introduction, that would be great.
Hi everyone, I'm Gavin Bridge, Senior Media Analyst at Variety's Variety Intelligence platform, and I'm on this panel because I found it very interesting both how, in all the work I've done following FAST and how it's growing in the US, both the potential that it has to create channels which previously you never could have run as media networks and explore in depth topics that may have only been documentaries, but also the trends I've been seeing with the channels themselves. There's one over there called Journey, which is a environmentally focused channel. So I'm here really for that bird's eye perspective, but to add some thoughts on that.
Hello everyone. I'm Søren Kuffert. I am here, I guess, because we set up a film fund called the Sustainable Film Fund, where we basically would like to use the film industry to address that big issue of climate change and environmental problems that we have today.
Nicely done. If only you looked as handsome as him, right? I'm Kevin Tris-Allen. I'm the managing director of Ecoflix. We're the #1 media company in the world for Animals and Planet, where all of the profits go to the animals and planet. Funnily enough, that's why we exist. I'm very famous for creating multi-million-pound brands on social media. So the link between film and advertising is a big thing for me around how we get films out there. On our board, we have some great people like Lionsgate who help us are trying to succeed forwards, and hopefully here today is a great forum to explain how the bridge between advertising and content can be achieved.
Hi, my name is Vincent Roger. I'm the CEO of Mobibase, which is a company creating TV channels and OTT platform. I'm here because with Christian, we have created the Global Environment Media Platform, which is also an amazing platform for the positive solution on the environment. So we'll be happy here to discuss how such channel, online services, online education can leverage this subject.
Thank you. And I think to add to Vincent, I'm Christian Moore, and we're creating Global Environment Media, which was, as Vincent said, the aim to push as much of the environmental content and positive solutions out there to as many people as possible, and aggregating as much information together as possible, which can be disseminated into various forms of education and edutainment.
Hi, I'm Thea Cole, and I run a creative agency called the Latimer Group. The Latimer Group has been a social impact agency since it was formed in 2011, and by that we specialise in a method that we call co-creation. So we work with audiences to bring them into the creative process and therefore diversify voices on screen, and also create good outcomes for those people in terms of educational and career opportunities.
Hi, I'm Jeff Fahey, actor, producer, humanitarian. And I am here as a guest with a film in the festival, but also have been asked to join the panel. And I don't feel as I'm an intruder, but I'm here to learn, as most of you are, and share some ideas and actually absorb what all these brilliant people have to say. So, because I think I speak for a lot of people out there as we move forward with the new platforms and streaming and NFTs. It's so few people that I talk to can really give me a definitive answer to what it really is. So it's one of the reasons that I was very excited to participate in the festival this year, and am very grateful to be here. So I'll just roll with the jazz today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's start the conversation with an understanding about what's been working in terms of creating socially conscious content. Kevin, do you have a success story or case study you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. And it starts with the word elephants. So we've got over 1 million views on social media with around elephants. I don't have an understanding of why we know elephants works, but the general public around film, particularly on elephants and short form documentaries, is really, really working for us. And I'm glad to say that we don't understand it, because if we can't be on this panel and be honest with you as consumers to say, if you're running brands and agencies and something happens as a trend, and we don't fully understand why it's actually okay to admit that, because sometimes you can... So dogs are the most searched content on video in the world. So if they outperform sport 2-1 currently at this stage in numbers as a evidence base. But yeah, we're having a lot of success with elephants. We are enjoying elephants. So we're doing a lot more around elephants. Obviously, we've rescued some elephants as a company in California out of, horrible places into sanctuaries that are much more viable for their lifestyle going forward. So our biggest trend right now is elephants. I'm not saying you should go and buy an elephant, by the way, just to be very clear about this, or adopt one, but they are working very well on social media and into our film content and views on our streaming platform.
Great, thank you. Thea, can you speak about your collaborative approach that you mentioned to content creation?
Sure.
And how are brands responding to that?
Well, we've worked a lot with different brands, also NGOs and charities. And so the way it works essentially is that we would take a brief from a client like any other agency, but the way we look at it is different, I suppose, because we lead our co-creation with insights. So that can be a formal insights process, or it can be something like a more informal workshop. And then those people who take part in those insights then help us with the creation of the idea, essentially. And they may, after that, move forward and be part of that content as well. So to give you an example, we worked with Public Health England in the UK on teenage mental health resilience. And we worked with a number of groups of teenagers around briefs that were really felt quite simple when we looked at them, and actually were quite nuanced when we dug into them with the young people. So we did particularly on sleep, for example. We had a situation where some of the teenagers in the room, one of them said, I stay awake until my eyes bleed. And then we were just like, as adults listening to the anecdotes and the kind of the real challenges they had over their sleep management was really quite shocking. So that sort of led us down a path of creating an influencer film actually with Roman Kemp just before he took the Capital Radio job. And we did this process for a number of different topics for Public Health England. And a lot of the kids that we work with also appeared in some of the films, so that then when you release that content, which went out on social media, we reached 70% of the target audience in the first year with 6 influencer films. So we know that it works in terms of impacting messaging, and we know that it works in terms of advocacy sharing, because obviously if you're invested, you're much more likely to share that with your peers on social. And it can work for all different audience groups. It doesn't have to be young people. But I think the adoption of the method was with young people to start with, just because they tend to be harder to reach for brands and charities and clients generally. So that's how it works.
Yeah, that's great. That's really innovative and quite a success story there as well. So thank you for sharing. Jeff, your movie premiered this week. A Bird Flew In, and it dealt with themes of isolation, which we've all had to deal with over this past little while with the global pandemic. Why did you want to get involved in this project, and do you think audiences can, find a way to relate or to heal from it? And as a second part of that question, do you think Hollywood is ready for more socially conscious content?
Well, may I answer the first question, or the second question first, rather? Absolutely, everyone is ready for socially conscious content, and I think it comes down to a lot of the people sitting here. It's the finance. What will be financed, and is it the chicken or the egg? Because if the product is out there and the subject matters are out there, they can still be very entertaining, but they can push us forward in a positive way. And I think Not that this time we're in now is any more special than any other changing times in the history of film and entertainment. But it seems that the audience is not so much in need, but craving, and somebody has to step forward. The scripts are there, the plays are there, the directors are there, the producers are there. The finance has to feel strong enough that they can get their return on that. And I think now that I really do believe we're in a place where that because of a lot, not just the COVID, but what's going on now and what has gone on over the last 20 years in different parts of the world, we are more than ready, we being, more than ready to have content that educates, entertains, and also gives us hope. So that's the answer to your second question. First question, the film A Bird Flew In, it was done right after the first lockdown in London, before the second one happened. So we were able to slip it in and work within a bubble, and the story was written. We come into the film, it's the last day of a film being made, and the first day of lockdown. So everybody has to leave the set and go to their apartments and homes. And it deals with isolation of all these different people. And it's quite powerful, and I saw it for the first time the other night, and it took me a couple days to absorb everything. But it was very moving, and I think there's definitely an audience for that and other films of that nature.
It's great, thank you. I think we live in a time where, especially as we're discussing on this panel today, that with the rise of streaming networks, there's just more choice, and even the more traditional media broadcasters are starting to recognize that they're going to have to adapt maybe a little bit more swiftly. Christian, you're focused on creating positive environmental media. Can you explain a bit about your mixed media approach and your work with NGOs and other organizations?
Of course. I think the ultimate idea was we were always trying to find ways to best get as much information out as possible, and we soon realized that there was an influx of content, certainly socially responsible content, and expressing and showing in graphic detail, in some cases, the horrors of what we're facing. And this turns a lot of people away. People will not finish documentaries, as we can see, because it doesn't give them a positive solution, doesn't give them any kind of a fix to what's going on. And also, they don't really know what to do. So there was a sense of hopelessness. So when Vincent and I approached each other and bringing both of our talents and expertise to the table, it was looking at how we can combine different forms of content and put it together. So for instance, we looked at short format content to keep people's attention, for starters, and with each piece of content, we supply infographics, scientific papers, and an understanding of how somebody can get involved and learn more, and certainly looking at individual communities, and they differ all over the world. Problems don't exist in India that exist here in Europe so it's how we can adapt that, because it's not a one model fits all. So by creating an educational platform, and I think it was more importantly interesting, like in so many other fields, people don't talk enough together, and the foundations, institutes really aren't sharing what they're doing with one another, and it seems that they have to find out themselves. So we found it actually one of the easiest parts of this project was uniting everybody, because with the storyline that we were presenting, it was about unifying and presenting something that was absolutely harmless, but actually completely in line with what their goals were. And yet they were incapable of being able to have either the manpower or the time or the resources to be able to put that together. So to date, I think we have close to 140 partnerships across the board.
That's amazing. And you're also creating some content in the kids space as well for...
Absolutely, and we've been turning our eye to the US market as well. Yep. We're currently under production, which in fact starts tomorrow, for content for the CW, which will be hitting the younger audiences in the States, and obviously the likes of bringing celebrities, people who are passionate, Jeff, and various other people to involve themselves in these programs, and not just be a static program, but actually be something that goes onto the platform and follows through with it.
Yeah, and I think it's great how you're combining other resources so that people understand how to take action rather than just kind of watching a movie like we did in the past and then walk away and then feeling disheartened and hopeless. So putting some solutions into this complicated problem is great.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, and it's amazing what we saw was prior to COVID, there was a huge amount of interest around the environment. COVID came along and that dissipated very rapidly to our surprise, because then all of a sudden there was information, oh, everything's getting better. Oh, there are dolphins in the Venice Canal.
Oh, right.
The air quality is better. And of course, it's a short uptick. But now we can see that things are actually getting worse far quicker because people have become complacent, too comfortable with it, and forgotten. And so with this, one of the important things is financing, getting companies to see the responsibility of branded content and how they can actually help, and staying away from greenwashing, which is obviously one of the things we all try and avoid.
Yep, thank you. Soren, can you talk to us a little bit about the Sustainable Film Fund, how it was conceived, and what your goals are, what type of projects you're making?
With pleasure. So maybe I should, I actually happen to live part-time in Cannes, so I have a long experience within the film industry, but from the perspective of the cocktail parties. So when we started up the Sustainable Film Fund, I got to know the film industry a bit better, and I learned that it's characterized by a lot of egos. So we want to change that into a lot of ecos instead. And the film industry is very strong and impactful and broad. And with the feature films and series that we primarily deal with, we can send that message out to the people that are really hungry for these solutions today.
And have you produced any projects in the fund to date?
So we support financially productions. We actually have a screening this afternoon on poaching and anti-poaching, and it ties up to sustainability and how much social inconsistencies are linked or part of the same equation as environmental inconsistencies. So I welcome you. I strongly recommend you to come and watch it. 5 o'clock. It's African produced, by the way, by itself.
Great.
Also a good testimonial because it's all African produced. It's a very low budget film, but it also showcases how much talent is coming out of Africa today, both in terms of script writing. It's an African Zimbabwean scriptwriter, an African director and producer, and actors are only from that region of Zimbabwe. So I strongly recommend you to come and see it. 4 o'clock. Please come.
That's great. And are you looking for more projects that are feature-length documentaries as well?
So we actually have 2 documentaries in process right now. Although that the fund, again, was set up to more address or work with feature, simply because, as Christian also said, it's so much more, it's broader and so much more appealing. And the idea is to get people on board because they identify themselves with the characters and the stories, whereas conventional documentary is a bit more gray eventually. Yeah.
Great. Vincent, your company is one of the leaders in thematic TV publishing with over 100 linear and VOD channels. How has the rise of streaming and fast channels services provided filmmakers more opportunities to create conscious content and created more choice for audiences?
Our first approach was actually to understand what is the people experience when they watch socially conscious movies or environmentally centric movies or documentaries or programs. And we found out that people don't want only to watch a video, but also want to get aware of the subject, want to learn about data, want to read articles or read scientific studies. So when, with Christian, we've decided to launch an environmental channel, we came to a strong concept of what we call mixed media, where people could not only watch a documentary or watch a movie or watch a cartoon or watch any edutainment programs, but also would get attached to the content, some infographics, some scientific studies. So we believe that when it comes to this very specific content, because to watch a Hollywood movie or to watch a documentary on celebrities, it's not the same as when you come to a subject which is linked to social and environmental challenges. So this is a key point on how to drag the audience from a video experience to an experience of enriching himself, herself, or passing messages. So this brought up to a second approach, a second chapter, which is the community. So you have your own video experience or whatever environmental experience, and you want to share it. And at GEM, Global Environment Media Platform, we aim also to build communities. So young kids would be interested by dolphins, would like to share with other kids from other parts of the world. And this community of people interested by dolphins could also involve scientists. And scientists who would like also to share data. Or if you have someone who wants to launch an eco-friendly farm, a shrimp farm in Madagascar, perhaps they want to exchange with someone in Vietnam who has launched also a shrimp farm. So this approach of developing specific communities and to have also artificial intelligence to be able to bring people together, to bring also scientific studies together, is at the core of this experience. And this is where the technology and the media today are enriching the experience of the traditional movie production, documentary production. And this is where I think where foundations, producers should meet together with this platform to bring not only their intention, but also their, I would call it their group of people, network of people. Would they be scientists? Would they be a foundation who has funded their films into this experience and bringing their documentaries, their data or their scientific studies or editorials. So this comes together as a joint experience. Mixed media, community is, I think, key to this new challenge of the environmental conscious content.
Yeah, I think it's great how you bring everyone together. I think, before we had these kind of tools with technology, people who cared about these issues might have felt very alone. So to bring everyone to collaborate is great. So you're also licensing content then in the space from other collaborators and like you mentioned, scientists or anyone else that might want to be involved in this platform can join. Yeah.
I think with everything it's the community more so involving the everyday person who comes in, but it's also the community that is working within the environmental space, such as with Kevin, with Soren, and then obviously applying talent to the mix. What we're able to do is create a more socially conscious group, and in our thought, how we actually integrate that through. Having subject matters filter into Hollywood films is wonderful. It brings that element up again, but yet the drama of the environment far exceeds entertainment. It is something that we're living, and I think that we have to wake up to some facts. And this is where, we're talking about elephants, for instance, and why there's this uptick in liking elephants. I mean, I support one of our charities we support is the Borneo Wildlife, and they have the pygmy elephants in Borneo. And these are the cutest little things you could imagine. It's 1,000 left, and in 20 years' time there won't be any. And then that's it, and they're gone. Yet, why are we protecting in the world when Borneo and local areas should be far more integrated? They have their own problems. And so we need to start solving those problems so they can start focusing on their homegrown issues themselves, opposed to relying on countries thousands of miles away to provide support.
Definitely. Gavin, as senior media analyst at Variety, are there any global trends that we can consider in terms of where we're going with streaming networks and the choice and variety that's now being offered to filmmakers and also for audiences?
Yeah, well, yes and no, right? Because it comes down to rights globally. But in terms of a structure, there's definitely a massive trend in the last 5 years, I think, really, is when it's begun to kick off with linear streaming and AVOD channels and services everywhere. These are now global in reach too. So you think of distribution. If you get your channel on a platform like Samsung TV Plus, right? Samsung's in many, many countries in the world. Their service is built into every TV that they sell now. You've got instant distribution globally. So if you want to put a message out there, it's really cheap and efficient to do so. You know, if you think back prior to the, high-speed internet, if you wanted to create a channel, you would have to go through all these licensing hoops, governmental regulations in every country. It would be very cost inefficient to create content. Even stuff that people really should want to know. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about that. There's cost efficiencies from setting up channels. Often the services actually will work with you and set it up for free because they would actually rather have a rev share deal with you. So it actually costs nothing other than having the content and having a couple of like ad logos and stuff like that made, but for the most part, very low cost to entry. And that's why we're seeing generally such a wide variety of channels emerging in the world. Like I mentioned Pattern, which is an environmentally social one in the US. There's a whole genre of fast channels in the US, which are just relaxation ones. So it's like having a nice screensaver, basically. You can have thunderstorms, fish, the beach, and it just, like, you couldn't do that with regular TV, right? So it's just to kind of give you the concept that at this point in time, you can create a channel out of anything and reach, obviously you don't have to market to them, but potentially you'll be able to reach anyone with a particular message. And to me, that's groundbreaking. It's like a new revolution in entertainment.
Yes, definitely. Kevin, you've been working with major global brands. Have they been shifting more towards conscious content? If so, does data play a role in the content development and strategy with those brands?
Are we being recorded? Yeah, so they are very conscious, and data is incredibly important. So we have a company in the UK called Tubular Labs, which some of the companies I ran called Lad Bible, Unilad, which other people will know or not here. It's the #1 millennial platform in the world, and they basically create content based on evidence. That could be a cricketer, an elephant, a sports star, an influencer, a journalist who's trending at the moment, and they are very reticent around how that money is spent, because one of the biggest barriers to all this stuff, everyone in the panel will know, when you're in front of the CFO or the investor, it's a bit crap, let's be honest, right? It's a bit like, well, I don't know, can you prove it? And does it make a difference? And how does it work? So I think some of the stuff we've been trying to do is doing a lot of evidence-based stuff around content provision, and then very mindful of where our audience is, because obviously I'm just going to speak about UK stats, in April, 9% of the UK over 25 joined TikTok. So that's like 6 million people who are over 25 went to a platform that you consider to be 12-year-olds, and actually it's not the case. So data around content provision, content creation, advertising, and what the message is about freeing an elephant, and some of the stuff you guys are amazing. I just learned that from the panel today, incredible, we should help. It's really, really important. Data is absolutely everything, because you have to, at some point, prove an ROI. Whether you free an elephant from a zoo in California, which we have been 35 years in the making of because of a damn policy and one clause within the policy, which I found that kills me for regularly around this stuff. So data is really, really important, but I think what's super important, as well as everybody in the audience or in the panel, is be really mindful of who's watching and where they're watching and why. Again, a stat on mobile, when you scroll up on your mobile, have a look at what content you're looking. It's 1.7 seconds at the moment in the world. So if you've spent £50,000 on an advert or £100,000 on a wonderful film like this man does and gets people to pay for it, bearing in mind, to get people to engage more than that 1.7 seconds, you lead to get to a streaming platform or an NGO or a film or behind us. Be really mindful that data should provide you a tiny wisp of evidence around who you should be targeting, what's important. And animals are an amazing way to drive people to care. And I think that's the empathy around what we do as human beings from this point in is going to define us, I think, in the next decade alone.
Does anyone here have any ideas for resources for filmmakers who don't have access to that data to inform the content that they're creating?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So there's a thing called Facebook IQ. If any of you guys, you can join it. It's a really good report. And I'm not the biggest fan of Facebook. They have their issues, right? We all get it. Bullying, anti-bullying, all the stuff that goes on in the world. But there are reports that are free online that tell you about trends and data and analytics. Tuber Labs is expensive. It's £48,000 a year if you're a business to subscribe. And as an NGO ourselves or a charity, we can't get it for free. And my boss is in the audience over there somewhere. She's wonderful. We can't even negotiate that to zero, which is quite frankly a pain. There are certain things you can follow, media companies that provide trends and reports, campaign broadcast, the drum, and there's a lot of stuff, probably in Variety as well, that you guys do a lot of surveys around trends. It's important to listen and learn. And let's be honest, we don't know the answer. None of us on this panel know the answers, but we need to try, and we need to just be better at trying and keep challenging the status quo. And, do you know, eventually, we'll smash it.
Thank you for all those resources. Do any of the panelists have any feedback on whether networks like Netflix and Amazon Prime are also like starting to shift into more conscious content, or are we looking more to the niche streamers at this point? Any feedback?
No, I'll go very shortly on this. Of course, Netflix, blah, 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 blah. But what is important is to give voices to all these foundations around the world, all these single people who do a lot of great jobs. So that's why we are here. So I don't care about Netflix or Amazon something.
I think if I can just jump in, Shelley, we talked a lot about environment. Of course, that's really, really important. But when we think about socially conscious content, we need to think of it in the round, really. So to me, this streaming opportunity is the first technological opportunity that means anybody can be a content owner, to your point about creating channels for really not very much money. Obviously, you've got to feed the beast, which is difficult, but, you know, essentially anybody can set up a channel. Now, with freedom comes great responsibility, and I think the responsibility for us as industry professionals is to make sure that we actually start to give an equal platform to different voices. So if we include audiences in our creative methods, and if we say, right, okay, we're going to create genuinely diverse and representative channels like Mango Tree, which will launch this year, you know, then we start to have cultural understanding, then we start to swap ideas, then the amazing work that you gentlemen are doing starts to have real cachet within a global landscape. And again, this is the first time we've really been able to broadcast globally, effectively and easily. So once we get to a point where everybody's included in this industry, and young people's voices at 18 plus who don't go to university also have the chance to be part of this industry, and different global continents around the world, their content's coming to the UK and the US and vice versa. That's how we create real social change across the piece, actually, economically, environmentally, and, you know, in terms of opportunity. That's what I think, anyway.
So to that point, actually, in the US, A&E networks if you're American, in the fall, if you're not, in the autumn, they're launching a channel, a fast channel, not a TV one, solely dedicated to underrepresented voices. And it's going to be like 24/7 new content. So you're seeing big media sort of getting in on those trends, which is, and I know it's been driven by people who are not represented necessarily in the media, but they're working at A&E, from the people I've met there who are working on it. So it's not like a headline grab, right? It's actually these people's passion project that they're being able to do because of the ease of creating these channels. Now, to answer your question, Amazon and Netflix, for instance, yeah, they subscribe to every data source in the sun. So they're going to know what people are interested in, what people are talking to, social media conversation. We saw the Netflix, I forget the name of it, that Netflix movie about, which was like satirical, I guess, with Leonardo DiCaprio. right? That's like a big version of something. That was more for headlines. They are making content too, but it's more how is it marketed? Is it push? Is it easy to discover? And I think at this point it may not be as easy to discover as something that's got like a big star in that will necessarily get them headlines. But you can kind of shift around and find stuff. And as more people talk, the more that they will create. So to be honest too, the more niche streamers that kind of create content too, then they'll notice that and they'll see a trend and then they'll start picking up on it as well.
I think to add to that is obviously I have seen an uptick in some way on Netflix with some documentaries and certainly with what they're trying to bring in, and they're buying these documentaries, they're not creating them themselves, and these are filmmakers that are out there doing this. What we're looking at as well is how to get that particular shift moving a little bit more, is integrating this content using the streaming platforms into schools. And it was always our intention to get this as a tool for teachers to pick on certain subjects which otherwise they would never talk about with their classrooms, and the steps that need to take place, but obviously presenting them with all of the tools they need to follow that through, from workbook to questions, and then obviously being able to have a well-rounded understanding on that subject. And when the children come home and they see these subjects, they're able to talk about them, then I think as a family unit, they're far more open to wanting to see this content, which then obviously the analytics would start to show and push that content even further.
Yeah, that's a great plan. Will you roll out in one country first, and do you have plans to do that? In terms of
we're starting now, so come September, we're going to be looking at trying to integrate this not only here, but in the UK, and pushing them into private schools predominantly, where they'll take them globally.
Yep.
It's difficult to integrate this into governments because governments all have special policies and they don't want you talking about certain things, and,
right.
and they have certain guidelines of what they want to discuss and not discuss. So I think the private route's better at this point, and keeping it free for everyone.
That's great. Jeff, you've been a longtime humanitarian advocate, helping people in Afghanistan and advocating on the plight of refugees. Are there any projects you're working on now to help bring awareness to these issues? And how do we tell difficult stories and remain hopeful?
Thank you. Yes, I've been working in Afghanistan, in and out of that country for some 40 years. But there are quite a few other places that I have been going into for some time over the years. And I'm right now at a turning point, and that's why I'm here. I'm talking to Christian and everyone, where I'm going to jump on board and be a little more public and move more into the documentary area of exposing the work that's been done. And because I've stayed under the radar for many, many, many years and been asked to come out and make documentaries. But I got a lot of work done under the radar and just working and connecting NGOs with USAID and other embassies on the ground in conflict areas. But it's time to make some documentaries and start speaking out to not so much to expose the bad, because we all see what that is, but rather go the route of pushing the hope and the possibilities. And you touched on it earlier that a lot of times people, they see what's going on through the news and through some documentaries, but predominantly through the news every day. And the problems of the world in these conflict and post-conflict areas looks so big and so distant, and everyone wonders, what can I do? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to get involved, and one is to start with your own life and better that, if you will. And I'm not here to preach, but it really does. It's the attitude and the empathy that one has, not for just people on the other side of the world that are now in a conflict or in a war or post-conflict, but start with your own small conflicts. Yeah. And it will lead you to the place of where you really want to be in the bigger problems of the world. And to that, that's why I'm moving and wanting to be here with people like yourselves and be involved with the documentary and putting out the content.
Well, thank you so much for all your years of work. That's amazing, and happy to hear that you'd like to be involved in more documentary projects, because
Thank you.
we'd like to know more about all your work. Can we talk a little bit about audiences? With so much choice, do any of the panelists here have any insight on how they're getting traction with audiences, how they're finding audiences, and how you're marketing your content and your platforms? Does anyone want to?
That goes to me then.
Yeah.
So obviously there's two sides to this. There's organic audiences and there's paid. So with every social media platform, you can pay a lot of money to get to audiences, and some of the targeting is very, very clever nowadays. And yeah, but again, some of the data that we use around elephants particularly just seems to really work. So a lot of our membership donations, our NGO provisions, our PR, and the people that are doing voiceovers, from some of the stars in the US to some of the stars in Europe, are data-driven around content, because we're trying to make a change as a business, as well as being a non-for-profit. I mean, being the first world's media company where all the profits go to animals and planet, it is really important that we live and breathe our values. Else, you know, someone like me on the stage in a year's time, I could meet this wonderful man who's very handsome. Look at these shoes, by the way, lovely shoes. He'll say to me, well, you weren't true to your values. And it's really important from advertising and the channels that we work from. It's important, and there's been a great discussion around kids and stuff around education. We provide all of our video content for free as well to schools. I think it's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. It's incredible. There doesn't seem to be enough uptake from the schools around Animal and Planet content. I mean, the great stuff you're doing is you think they'd bite your hand off, but there's quite a lot of regulation around it. It needs to be approved bodies. We're doing a lot of work in the UK around some of the 5 top providers around getting into schools with Animals and Planet, because the people that can make a change are Gen Z, which we kind of class as 12 to 24 as a bracket of audiences. And they're the ones that, unfortunately, we're going to leave the planet with when we pass on to our next world, wherever that is. So it's important that audiences become a massive part of it. But then, in saying that, 55-year-olds on our platform are really engaged. They're probably the most viewed audience on the platform at this stage. And it's probably because they're really, really interested in the work we're doing and the great cultivation that we're working with creators and NGOs and filmmakers. And then the other thing around audiences, which is we've got a real trend at the moment, is diversity. And I hate to be that diversity person that goes, oh, he's got his hand in there because he's white and he's a man. We are working with a black filmmaker at the moment in the Bahamas who does the most amazing underwater filming without a mask or anything, and he films sharks and goes underwater in caves. I don't know how he holds his breath for 3 minutes. I'm panicked about 4 minutes into the film, like, oh my God, please come up for a breath of air. But I think audiences are really, really important. I think whatever program, whatever platform you're in, streaming agencies, creative agencies, that lady at the end there, we do really need to understand on who's watching and why. And when a brand's paying or an investor, it's so important that you produce some kind of at least an analysis of why the idea you've got going forward is important and what change it can bring. And again, so some of the platforms I spoke to you about, if we can underpin it with evidence, we're going to have a slicker time in getting this stuff off the runway into the air and change the world. Hopefully that's useful.
Just to add, you know, one of the ways to tackle, and which we've been exploring and starting to apply, is the social media and influencers and responsibilizing them. We've seen obviously a very portrayal of humanity with ridiculousness coming out and people talking garbage, and you see how many people watch this. I mean, my children, I see some of the programs they watch, and I see 30 million followers of somebody who's just talking gibberish. If these people could push, and you know it's true, but if these people could push responsibly subject matters, picking them out and working with groups like ourselves, then they can start at least influencing some of those people as well. And then you can start seeing that.
Absolutely.
Aggregation
you
of
have something to add?
Views.
Yeah.
Shelley, can I just add an example to that, actually, which might be pertinent for what you're trying to do? So Latimer worked with Greenpeace before the lockdown on 2 of their Meat Free Week campaigns. So Meat Free Week, you may know, is obviously a week when everybody around the world tries not to eat any meat. And, just before the lockdown, it was probably more challenging than it is now, actually, because we weren't sort of heading economically downhill at that point. So essentially what we did is we gathered 12 influencers together from all over the world, from the Philippines to Canada to France. They were very disparate. They didn't know each other. And we gave them a brief, and we let them create their own content to that brief, which we then signed off. And of course, there were various parameters, as you'd expect, around how many times they needed to post and how many what kind of content they needed to make. So had all our posts ready. And in 1 week, those 12 people got 6 million engagements.
Awesome.
So it is such a powerful tool. And the advocacy piece, now I guess, the way I think of influencers is I think of people of influence, because there's an amazing small agency in London actually called Humanitarian Youth, who is bringing together climate activists from across the world to talk to each other in forums, and then we're working out how we can use those people of influence to help with, talking about not only climate crisis, but also human rights in Afghanistan and the things that those young people are genuinely experiencing every day. So your influencer group may not be famous people. It might be people who just have a common interest. And when Greta was doing her school strikes some years ago and Extinction Rebellion was new, there was an 80-year-old arrested on Waterloo Bridge, and you kind of think, well, a Greta and that man, so very different, 60 years between them, but they're both protesting about the same thing. So the expertise is in how to find the right people to influence the audience that you want to reach, and it works.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I was a vegetarian when I was 8 years old, and there was no resources back then. So to see where, I would get a mail order catalog to share information about vegetarianism back then. So to see a campaign like this be so successful, it makes me really happy. So we just have a bit of time left, and I want to ask 2 more questions if we can. I think first question for the panelists is, what role do filmmakers play in the greening of the film industry? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah, that's that.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, want to address what we just spoke about of the audience, then we can take it to the other question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Soren.
So why don't we make the audience to be influencers? And why don't we take it a step further to make them to be actors, like doing action?
Yeah.
So the thing is that what we're trying to do with the Film Fund is that we try to create, we try to put a layer on just the artistic storytelling and put a message into the film. And that message would inspire the audience to create awareness and behavior change. But why stop there? Why not take it that even last mile further to actually do action on the ground? So we created a model, we call it From Fiction to Reality. And it's basically associating NGOs, programs on the ground that has some kind of a link to that story or that film.
Okay, great. So then people can group together and take action?
Yeah, so you create some kind of an interactive audience.
That's awesome. That's one of the great things about where we are with technology today, is that we can use it to our advantage in that way and get communities of people together.
Exactly. And then the funny thing is that also creates some supplementary upsides, which happen to be funding, for new funding opportunities, and even new distribution opportunities, and even new communication opportunities, because it's something that differentiates to the conventional storytelling.
I would say on the community front, and actually, Jeff, you mentioned at the start something about NFTs. So I'm not an NFT head. I know I did the thing yesterday, but I do cover it for Variety a lot. And I did an interview with Baron Davis, he was an NBA All-Star who's now moved into philanthropy, actually. And he's doing community-based NFTs. And he had a theory that in that world, there's something called a DAO, right, which is like a collective group, and then they buy things or they influence. And he has this big theory that politics is going to be influenced by DAOs, so that someone running for president may say, oh, I'm a member of this group and that group, to kind of show where they're running. And I think that sustainable sustainable NFTs or socially conscious NFTs, any topic like that, you can create these communities that will, you can incentivize with tokens, but it will enable people to come together, incentivize a little bit, but really harness technology and community to to drive change.
Well, in saying that, one of the things is obviously the incentivization. If we look at what we need to change, how we educate people in the change that's coming, for instance, with NFTs and how they can play a role in this. But it's also about being able to provide the solution and substitute there. If you say, we need to stop eating meat, we need to stop eating dairy, we need to start calming down on this, because it's obviously very heavy on the environment, not just our health. But people are complacent in their everyday lives. They're used to this. If they go to their supermarket and the supermarket doesn't provide them with alternatives, but they realize that they have to go, if they're bothered to find out where, a different route to go home to get their things and bring this in. It's about incentivizing, and NFTs can play a role in helping incentivize some of the change, not just obviously about food, but obviously about how we live our daily lives.
And has anybody here been working with NFTs in their projects or have plans to?
A lot of talk has been going around. We're figuring
Maybe
it out,
year.
how we can get that.
Yeah, maybe next year we'll have some thoughts on that. And so in the last few minutes to wrap up, if the panelists, we can just go in order here, can speak to some of the challenges in the industry and what do you hope to see change?
I would say the challenge is really messaging, getting people to drawing an audience in, because as great as it is that we have this world where you can create anything and there's all this content, there is all this content, and you've got to kind of cut through the clutter to get your message out there. That to me is the biggest challenge. Is like you could create the best thing in the world, but if no one knows how to watch it, then that's a big hindrance. So we can solve that, and there's little solutions people are coming up with. Ad swaps on digital platforms. AI is going to play a big role in being able to predict across services. If you're interested in one thing, you're interested in another. But yeah, breaking through that clutter for messaging.
Our point of departure is sustainability, although that the social part is a part of the same equation. All is interlinked, as I addressed earlier. But it has to be appealing for the audience. It has to be sexy, even, in the good sense. One of our starting points was that we wanted to make sustainability trendy. And we were reflecting on what is it actually that makes things trendy. By far, the film industry has a big element of that in it. I think it has just to be sustainability or acting socially, impacting, have to be worth it for people and the communities. So easy.
Thank you, Søren.
Done the right way.
Kevin?
Thanks. So we just talk about greenwashing quickly, and I'll do this really quickly. So we are a punchy brand. The people behind the EcoFlix are some bolshy sods, quite frankly, because you have to be. And we are talking to brands like BP and Shell because as much as we can say, well, they are greenwashing to certain degrees, they have so much money to change the planet and so much political take on how we can move forward. And one of them, I won't say which one, is just one of the largest wind farm projects in the UK around the north side of Scotland. And we need to be a part of helping. They have these heads of sustainability, heads of corporate social I. So we do need to, and I hate that greenwashing phrase because it does my nut in quite a bit, because if we don't become the brands that say, all right, we know you're killing the planet in certain degrees, but if we can't help you, who can help you? And we should be the first point of call to say, when you make a video or a series or a decision around wind farms, you need to speak to people like us and everybody on this panel to say real change is a part of your DNA and ours, and we should partner quicker than stick our heads in the bloody sand and do nothing. There you go.
Thank you, Kevin. Great job. Yeah, I totally agree with what you say. I would point the challenge of online education, online universities. What we are all doing should be part of online programs for university, from kids to companies' internal trainings. And the challenge is to turn the productions, the content, the data into online programs, which could be for free for schools, or pay for different kind of other programs. So our challenges for our ecological platforms is the online education.
Jeff?
And I think the aspiration would be to, as Kevin said, working with the energy sector, working with companies. And one of the problems we've had is foundations don't want to be associated necessarily, but that's kind of ridiculous in some ways. We understand why. I think the challenge is also what I'd like to see is a more socially responsible uptick from advertisers and how we go about advertising socially responsible content. We shouldn't be paying top dollar to get messaging out there that everyone should know. It's not fair. We can't do it. Half the time we can't do it. So 90% of the message gets lost and never is seen. And we can't rely on news networks to just provide that information. So it would be nice if there was somewhat of a furlough for us to be able to move forward with socially responsible content. I think we'll all agree on that one.
Definitely. Thea?
Well, a couple of things. So the first is, if you're a producer, check out BAFTA's Albert, and that will help you, to your point, Jeff, put our own house in order in the way we produce and the way we create content. It's really, really important. They launched it 10 years ago. It has all the resources you need to green your production. So that's the first thing. But really what I would like to see is a genuinely inclusive and representative industry in the streaming space that embraces young people, that brings them in and trains them, upskills them to be able to share their voices. Because until we actually empower young people to drive this debate forward, we're not going to change the world, frankly. So I think that we have this incredible toolbox at our disposal now. It has genuine inherent power. And if we don't use it for the greater good, then we failed as professionals. And we have to do it now. To your point, the urgency is now. It's not next year. By the time we get back this time next year, if we're sitting here and we haven't achieved a measurable difference, then I don't know what we'd say to each other. So let's do it.
Yes. Yeah. Jeff, some wrap-up thoughts?
Yes, I think I'm sorry?
Quickly.
Oh, please. Okay, real quick, what I'm getting from this, and I think we all agree, is that we find a way to bring the energy and the youth and the vibrance that the youth has and the power they have with the social media and combine it with those who've been around a little longer, and the youth is busy learning and experiencing life, and some of us would like to, in our later years, change some things that we've seen for too many years, and bring those two energies together, and I think we can solve a lot of things a lot quicker.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.